Good evening and welcome. Welcome to That's the Law. I'm BJ Krintzman. I'm an attorney in Newton, and it's good to be back. We were trying to figure out, we haven't done a show for, it's almost a year, I think since last April. Just lots of things happening and going on and dealing with COVID like everybody else. And tonight we're going to focus on the effects of COVID for people who try to help us out and people who are running the state and people who are trying to legislate under these conditions. So with us, as always, we have the expert, and tonight we have Representative Ruth Balser. Ruth, welcome back.
Hi, BJ. It's great to be with you. I haven't been with you since COVID. This is the first time we've done it on Zoom, but I'm glad to be here. Although once we did record in your home, I remember.
Yeah. No. You know what, Ruth? I have you that you were on in November of 2019. Now, didn't COVID begin? Oh, no, COVID began in sort of March of 20.
March
Yeah.
of 20.
So your last visit I had was November of 2019. And by the way, I think that was are you sitting down, Ruth?
Yeah.
18th time coming on the show.
Yes,
so,
you're a recidivist.
My favorite recidivist, right? So it's good to have you back. And, I was trying to get the statistics right. What year are you? How many years have you been our state rep?
This is my 24th year.
24th.
So I'm in my 12th term.
Wow.
Yes, it's amazing, actually.
Yeah, I know. Congratulations. And many thanks for all your work for us. So, I mentioned COVID. Let's begin with COVID. And I want to know what the impact of COVID has been on you professionally. How, have you been working from home? Has the legislature been meeting in person? What's been going on?
So, yes, I've been working mostly from home. So on March 13th of 2020, my staff and I collected all our belongings, as they used to say in elementary school, from our office. The state of emergency, now I can't quite remember, but the state of emergency was declared. The State House was closed. It had closed a day or two before. We spent a day because we figured we were going to be working from home for a little while, although we had really no idea. I remember thinking, well, maybe I'll come in once a week, even though the State House is closed. Anyway, we packed up and we set up shop each in our own homes. I have 3 people on my staff. We all packed up what we thought we would need, each went to our homes, and we began to do what we always do, except from our homes. First thing was we set up a thing of contact, one of my aides calling into my voicemail every hour because my constituents were still going to be calling that phone. The House had to set up a system for having sessions and for having public hearings. And we, like everyone, started doing things virtually. The House set up something a little different for how to have sessions. We took a break. I can't remember now how long our break was from full formal sessions, but we had to develop a system. We set up a system of having monitors in the room. A certain number, maybe 20 out of the 160 representatives would be in our full formal sessions. Everyone else was on a phone line to our monitor. On our phone, we could hear the session and we could debate into the session. And we put through our votes that way to the monitor, who then recorded it to the clerk, and then it got put on the wall. This is still what we're doing. The difference is more of us are coming in person now. What I did, the decision I made, because you asked sort of personally, I did not opt to be a monitor during that initial period of time. I wanted to stay home, and it was only up to people's choice. Once I was vaccinated, I started going back to sessions in person, but most of the reps still are doing it from home.
And Ruth, before COVID, I don't even know if legislative sessions of the House are open to the public or they're not. And my question, of course, is when you're on Zoom, was there a way to make them open to the public?
Yes. They're actually more open to the public now. So the House sessions are not Zoom. The House sessions are audio and streamed. There is a live stream, which anyone can watch by just going to malegislature.gov. That's the website of the Massachusetts legislature. And there's a live stream of the session, which, by the way, is watched not just by the public, but by the members who are at home calling in their votes on the phone. They're watching the stream on the screen to see what's happening there, and they're listening. It's complicated, but it's actually more transparent to the public. Not only is it live streamed, but it's recorded. And if you want to watch it later, and that was never the case before.
So, it's interesting because as an attorney, and I've been involved in over this since COVID, a litigation matter that has taken me into the courts all the time, but we did it on Zoom, and the court system is all set up similarly to how you say, and anybody essentially can click in and click on the link and get into the session, because part of, a bedrock principle of our judicial system is that it happens in the open. We don't drag people behind a curtain and then suddenly they're dead, or incarcerated or whatever. So they had to figure that all out. And I think the sessions are recorded. You probably have to pay to get a copy of the recorded session. You have to get it transcribed, that you have to pay a stenographer to do that. But so dealing with the same thing of still wanting to be open to the public at a time when everybody's home, and having the same effect you were talking about, which is more people could come to court sessions than probably would have.
Absolutely. What's been really wonderful has been our public hearings, because those are Zoom or Teams. They use Microsoft Teams, but whatever. But those people love the public hearings, because you used to have to if you were a citizen and you wanted to come testify on a bill at a public hearing, you probably had to take off. If you didn't live in Boston, you had to take the day off from work, drive into the city,
right.
Spend time, squish.
Don't forget parking.
That's right, parking. And now with the hearings have been a tremendous success. So people all over the state now can just pop on for an hour or whatever it is, and testify and watch. And there's been a lot more actual transparency. And those hearings also are recorded and posted. So if you want to see a bill hearing, if you didn't watch, you can go. So that has been the silver lining. There's been more public accessibility to the actual hearings and sessions.
Right. And you know what? I think that some of these methodologies that we've been using are going to survive COVID if we ever get past this, because the accessibility is fabulous. I'm talking about both at the courts and maybe at the State House.
Absolutely. I can't imagine us going back completely without at least some kind of hybrid, because people really have had more access.
Right. Well, the only other you covered all the topics I was going to ask you about in this, except for one, which is that I don't know about the State House if there's a lot of persuasion that happens through schmoozing.
Yes.
Okay, and bumping into someone in the hallway and, that kind of thing. And whether, obviously you're missing that. It has to be more formalized. You have to actually get in touch with someone to try to convince them to support your bill. So how's that been working out?
Oh, you're right. The schmooze factor, that is the one thing that people complain about, especially the members of the public. So they will acknowledge that, yes, the hearings are better, but a lot of people say what they can't do is, just walk around the halls and knock on the door of an office. And even if the rep or senator isn't there, get a staff member, everything is formal. Like, I'll meet any constituent who wants to meet with me, I'll meet virtually. But you're right, the knocking on the door, the just being at the event and then bumping into your legislator, that's missing. And then also the colleagues talking with each other. In the sessions, that's when you got a lot of your work done, because there's downtime during a session. You recess, someone's working on something, you would talk with each other, and that's all missing.
That's what I really had in mind, was how
Right.
you convince your colleagues to support a bill that you're working on or something like that. So speaking of supporting and speaking of getting bills, their work has gotten done during this 3 years for sure. 2
2 years.
2 years, excuse me.
Yes, it feels
We're
like.
entering our third year.
Right.
And as long as we've been talking about the effects of COVID, I'd like you to talk about the COVID initiatives that the state has taken to help people go through what we've all been going through.
Well, it's really been incredible. And I jotted down things because there's so many that I can't remember them all. But at the beginning, when we're already in a different phase, but that's all we did was work on relief to people, who were really hurting in the pandemic. One of the most important things was the moratorium on housing evictions. Just, you couldn't evict someone for not paying their rent.
Is that still in effect, or?
No, the moratorium stopped, and what we transitioned to, I could look at my notes, but I won't be able to find it right away at which point we transitioned, but that was in effect for quite a number of months. Oh, it expired in October of 2020. So it was from like March or April to like 6 months or something. That was in effect. Then what we switched to was a pretty significant infusion of dollars to MLAC, Mass Legal Assistance, to legal aid, to give tenants a lot of support around evictions and representation in the courts. So the whole issue of trying to protect people from eviction was a big piece.
And what about unemployment assistance?
So that was big too. So the state went further than the federal. We expanded beyond what the feds were doing. And by the way, so unemployment was big. Fast forward to just today, there's news. One of the things we passed, President Biden gave us ARPA, the American Rescue Plan, and it was our job to spend, $4 billion so far of it in Massachusetts. And a big chunk went to give a bonus to the frontline workers who worked through it. So we had done all this unemployment earlier. Now, as recently as today, the checks went out the door. We passed it about a month or two ago. So $500 payments went to how many people? About 500,000 low-income workers across Massachusetts are going to get a $500 check this week in the mail. And they had to be people who did not get unemployment, because these were the people who, in the grocery stores and, who kept working. And so that was big.
During COVID, because of COVID, our whole understanding, at least I'll say my understanding of what a frontline worker means, changed. Who the heroes are, changed. When I see the letter carriers, when I see people stocking shelves at the grocery store, I didn't go out of my house for 2 years. Right. They had to, right?
Right.
And of course, the only thing is, I was able to work from home, and you're in trouble if you get on a plane and the pilot comes on and says, "Welcome to our flight today. Today I'll be working from home." Okay.
Yeah, right. That's right.
You're in trouble. But anyway, so I'm thrilled that they're going to get those bonuses. That's great. Or not, I don't know what you call it, but
it's kind of a
compensation. Yeah, it's fabulous.
Compensation, that's a better way. But
yeah, and
also COVID emergency paid sick leave. We extended beyond its regular sick leave, an extra, and that's in effect until April, up to a week of payments to recover from COVID or from a vaccination. That expires April 1st.
I think it covers if you have to be quarantined as well, that you're covered for a week, time off to get a vaccination, to get medical treatment for, I don't know if it's, and to help a sick family member. I think it covers that too.
Yes, I believe so.
And that's going to expire in April. So we got to all get better. We've got to all get better between now and April, huh?
Right, I guess so.
Okay, and I've got a website for that, and we'll post that up. It's www.mass.gov/info-details/COVID-19-temporary-sick-leave-program.
I hope someone's putting that up on the screen because that's good. All right.
We'll get that up. And I'll also, Ruth, how are our statistics with, I said we've all got to get better. How are we doing as a state? If you happen to know Newton, how we're doing right now?
Okay, so with the vaccine, let's talk about vaccination rates because that's key.
Yeah.
Well, let's put the context. Across the country, not more than 900,000 people have died from COVID. In Massachusetts, more than 21,000 have died from COVID. Now, in our vaccination rate, Massachusetts is one of the best states in vaccination rates. 87% have received at least one dose. 52% of fully vaccinated receive boosters. Now, compared to Newton, you're interested in Newton. So Massachusetts, 87% received at least one dose. Newton, more than 95% received at one dose,
Right.
95%. 88% are fully vaccinated in Newton. And 50.
And we're defining fully vaccinated as 2 shots or as a booster?
No booster. So
Just
that,
2 shots.
yeah, because the CDC hasn't changed that definition yet.
Right, okay.
But in Newton, 56% of the total population have received boosters. Newton is really like practically got like the best rates like in the country. I mean, it's really something. I mean, our community gets it. When you look at the map of the country, the highest vaccination rates are New England. It's pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah.
In that regard, but there are still people not getting vaccinated, and that's why we still have people who are sick. I compared to the United States, 60. Well, it doesn't matter. Okay, I'll get lost.
No, it's very encouraging. Massachusetts is doing well. It sounds like Newton is doing even better in terms of vaccination rate and in terms of incidences of the of the virus. And I think that there were this spike that we had in the viruses,
the Omicron,
was legitimate in the Omicron, but it was also because there was so much testing going on now that we were picking up asymptomatic cases that were not picked up with Delta. So I'm not saying it means they didn't have COVID, but in a way we were almost comparing apples and oranges, because we weren't testing asymptomatic people during Delta. So I think that the statistics may be skewed a little bit. Well, thank you, Ruth. Thank you for all of your.
I'll leave us with one last statistic, because I think it's good to know the human. In Massachusetts, there are, even though the numbers are getting really better, there are still 50 people dying every day in Massachusetts from COVID, and 2,000 people hospitalized. So we're not out of the woods yet, although the numbers are getting better. So the key is for people to get vaccinated.
Right, and to stay vigilant. And it gets really hard entering year 3 to kind of not get sloppy, but I'm trying really hard to stay vigilant and try to get through this. So thank you. Thank you for helping us with that. So other initiatives, what were you able to do? I know that you've, I want to talk about voting.
We did both chambers of the legislature has passed a voting rights bill, or that we call the Votes Act. As always, the two bills are slightly different, but basically there's a national conversation about voting rights. And there are states in this country that are passing laws that are designed to make it harder for people to vote. And so in Massachusetts, we're trying to do the opposite, which is to pass laws that make it easier for people to vote. And what we did, what both chambers have done some version of, is making permanent some of the changes we made during COVID. So during COVID, we did all this mail-in voting because people, we didn't want people indoors. Well, it turns out that was a big success. And so we just voted to make that permanent, that you don't have to have a reason to mail in, you just want to. We made the early voting permanent. We did what we call jail-based reforms. We did a whole thing about making sure that those incarcerated people who are eligible to vote will get the assistance getting registration forms so they can vote. So it's a big deal. The idea was for Massachusetts, again, to lead the way and say, we're going to do whatever we can to make it easier to vote.
That is fabulous. Again, thank you. My concern, of course, is how this stands up. Whether at the federal level, either the Supreme Court or I'm going to say it, a Republican administration at the federal level can come in and undo the rights that you are establishing. And I'm particularly concerned, we're Zooming today, it's February 8th, and the Supreme Court of the United States just handed down its decision in the Alabama case, where it ended up overturning the lower court that had said that they could not gerrymander the way they were gerrymandering because it was essentially just so prejudicial to Black voters that it was eliminating the Black vote essentially. And the Supreme Court, by a vote of 5-4, said it's okay, they can do it. And one of the dissenting voice was Roberts. Whoever thought Roberts has now become a more moderate voice on the Supreme Court. But so is our Votes Act susceptible to federal changes to it?
I don't believe they could change these things because the states, the redistricting is actually different than things like mail-in voting, I believe. I think what the bigger challenge nationally is that what the Democrats in the Congress wanted to do was a national voting rights law, sort of similar to the things I just laid out in terms of the state. And they failed to get the votes to kill the filibuster, as we all know, because of Manchin and Sinema. So what we have in Massachusetts, other states won't get in those states that have Republican legislatures. But I don't believe the Supreme Court, I'm not a Constitution, I'm not even a lawyer, but I don't think the Supreme Court could tell Massachusetts, for instance, that you can't have early voting.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, well, I can see if they said at federal elections, they could control maybe federal elections and say you can't have early voting in federal elections because we're the federal government.
Except doesn't the state still control? Well, I don't know. So it's a good question. We should write.
Doesn't the state still, Ruth, there were so many things we thought, everything we thought wasn't under, the most recent regime. But anyway, thank you for that. Just before we leave that topic, what about voter registration?
Do you mean election day registration or
I think we've eased up on how you can register to vote, have we not?
Oh, but yes, that's already been true for quite a while. Like you can do it automatically with your driver's license.
Okay, yeah.
I forget, there are some other ways that you can do it automatically, but right now I'm not remembering because I think those were already in place.
Okay. Now I know, a main issue of yours has always been healthcare, particularly mental health care. It's probably why we're friends. I reach out to people who care about mental health. So what's going on at the state level for mental health initiatives?
Well, there's been a lot of concern on the part of everyone in the legislature about the mental health impact of COVID, especially on our young people, on students with remote learning and all the stresses. And both chambers have said that we're going to do a big mental health legislation before the end of the session. For me, individually, in terms of my work on mental health, a lot of what I'm involved with is what I call decriminalizing mental health, trying to make sure that people who suffer from mental illness or addictions get treatment in healthcare facilities and don't land in the criminal justice system. And I became, even though I don't live in Boston, I became a little involved with the mass and Cass issue, which folks have probably read about, because there was an earlier, before the new mayor of Boston was elected, there was a conversation about whether to incarcerate some of these people to provide them with treatment. And I took a stand about how that's the exact opposite direction we should be moving in. We need to provide services in a healthcare setting, not in a prison setting.
Right. And it even begins earlier than that, which is who goes on the domestic abuse emergency call. Is it a policeman? Is it police, police people, I should say, police, with a social worker? How do these things get handled? But what I was thinking about when I was thinking about asking about this topic was that substance abuse, mental health are so connected with crime, because people, who suffer from mental health issues and from addiction commit crime. So I'm trying to think about how the justice system, is going to deal with all this. And you're talking about not incarcerated, but there's also.
But a lot of times it's people who haven't committed any crimes. So, okay. So for instance, one of my top priorities has to do with something we call Section 35, which is the law in Massachusetts that allows a court to send a severely addicted individual to involuntary treatment because they're at risk of harming themselves or others. They're so sick. Right. And in Massachusetts is the only state in the country that allows those civilly committed individuals to be sent to a prison facility rather than a healthcare facility. And these are people who've not committed a crime. They've not been charged with a crime. They are sick. And often it's a loved one who takes them to court thinking this is the only way to get them help. And before they know it, the person is shackled, put in a van, and sent to a prison facility. So I have legislation that would not prohibit involuntary commitment, but prohibit sending those folks to a prison instead of a healthcare facility.
Wonderful. I'm shocked that Massachusetts, usually we're at the forefront in the other direction. I'm just shocked that we allow that.
It's an old statute, and we changed it for women, interestingly enough. Women used to be sent to MCI Framingham when they were civilly committed. A few years ago, we stopped that. My bill would prohibit it for the men as well.
Fabulous. So now, just to circle back, we've only got a minute left. You got to schmooze that bill. You've got to get, you have to figure out a way to talk to other legislators so everyone's on board.
Well, it's true, because I have scheduled meetings with various key people on it on Zoom, but you're right. I have to go and talk to everyone about it. So that's how I got my gender equity bill, which in years past, you and I always talked about on the show. I talked to pretty much every one of my colleagues in the chamber. One day I just moved from person to person to person to ask for their votes on that. Yeah. So you're right. It's harder to do that now.
It's another way to define all politics as local. It's all legislation is person to person,
right.
in so many ways. Ruth, we're out of time, but I want to tell you, thank you so much. Thanks for what you've been doing. Thanks for working so hard for us under these difficult conditions in the past 2 years. It's really wonderful. And you know that I'm a big fan of yours and always like the side that you're on. So I really appreciate it. And let us know if there's any way we can help you get any of your initiatives through.
Thank you. It's great to see you. I love that you're still doing this show, even if on Zoom instead of in person at NewtTV. It's great. I love it.
Yeah, the human spirit, right? Thanks again, Ruth. We'll see you next time on That's the Law. Good night.